Hi everyone, Dr. Marco. Welcome to this week's health tip. This week is going to be a little long because there's a pretty interesting topic that very few chiropractors actually approach this in the way that I do. And it's sort of like a kind of a mystery thing that can cause a lot of vague kind of problems that some people might have and they don't really know what's causing it. So you probably have heard the term hiatus hernia. You might have heard it before, but a lot of people don't know what kind of things that they can experience when they have it. And some of them are a little strange and obtuse, really. So just globally, conceptually, what happens is, I got my little picture here. So this is your mouth, and normally food would come down your esophagus down here, and it would go through a little hole in your diaphragm. So your diaphragm is the muscle that's underneath your lungs that goes up and down when you breathe in and out. But there's a little hole in it to allow the esophagus, so the food has to go, your stomach is underneath it, and the food has to get to it. So it goes through a little hole. So there's a little hole in the diaphragm for your esophagus, and your stomach should be resting underneath that in a normal situation. That's the healthy situation. So a hiatus hernia happens when there's a little weakness in that little hole, and part of your stomach actually starts to push its way up into that little hole there. And it can cause a real myriad of a lot of different problems. So when people have this, they can experience weird things, like sometimes they feel like there's something in their throat and they keep swallowing but they can't get rid of it, or they feel like there's a little stricture there in their throat, that kind of thing. They can get sinus problems because of this, like chronic sinus infections can be a result of that. Having a tickle in the throat, ticklish throat, that's a really common one as well. Some of the other things that can happen in here, because it's kind of pushing up into an area, the upper part above your diaphragm, you have a few important organs here. There's your lungs and your heart. And if that stuff is actually pushing up, it can actually crowd out one of your lungs, and that can cause shortness of breath for unknown reasons. It can cause your heart to be racing, or it can cause irregular beats of your heart and things like that. And so there's a couple of nerves that come out of your neck here that travel down this way. So I mentioned one in another video about having right shoulder pain. If your phrenic nerve, the nerve that controls your diaphragm, is irritated anywhere along its course, because especially your gallbladder can irritate just underneath the diaphragm, and that can cause right shoulder pain by going back up that nerve and irritating where it comes from, and that can cause this pain in the shoulder and the head and cause headaches and things. So the phrenic nerve can be irritated because of this, but the other nerve is called the vagus nerve, and that's like the 10th cranial nerve that comes out of your head. It's a nerve that comes out of your skull. It goes down right in front of the first bone in the neck, and it goes in and it supplies a lot of information for all your organs inside your body, pretty much are controlled by that, and sensation of the organs. A lot of different things are controlled by that nerve. It's a really important nerve. So other than that, it controls a lot of sort of like digestive health and organ health on the inside. They call it something called polyvagal theory, where it has a couple of other functions. Some of them are emotional, freezing you if you're at fight or flight, this kind of thing. But there's a fairly big emotional complex to it. And if that nerve is irritated or kind of blocked because of this problem too, it can cause vague sort of emotional symptoms too, like anxiety and kind of dread, and some other things can happen because of that as well. So what can cause you to have this hiatus hernia? Well, sometimes bad posture and poor tone in your nerve system is a big thing. So for example, if the phrenic nerves are the nerves that will come down from your neck to control this, if you have like stress on the lower vertebrae in your neck, you might be actually blocking or causing less activity in those nerves that would be controlling your diaphragm, possibly causing weakness. There's some muscles in your pelvis, these ones here, called the psoas muscles. These are the ones that would be flexing your hip, but if that muscle is tight, there's little slips of that muscle that attach to the diaphragm. It could hypothetically pull it on one side or the other, cause that opening to be a little loose. You hit a bump or you sneeze, and the stomach might pop up and get stuck up there. Because what happens is there's a normal tone in that hole, right? So if the stomach happens to pop up, because there's like a resting tone that's kind of keeping that muscle tight, the stomach stays above it. And I had a patient who had shortness of breath, going upstairs, wheezing, and lots of problems. Did all these tests, and they couldn't find what it was, and the heart racing and the whole bit. And so she luckily brought me X-rays that they had taken of her lungs, which they said were all clear. But there was a very obvious thing there. It's called a meniscal sign. So things that have gas in intestines, or sorry, on X-rays, look really dark. And you could see that there was a very pronounced black, almost like the top of a bubble, just right above the diaphragm, right impinging on the left side. It was super obvious to me when I looked at it. So this is a pretty important thing because it can cause a lot of different problems. So, so how do you get it? Oh, other things like if you fall on your bum, for example, or banging your head, or certain traumas, that kind of thing. Really bad coughing episodes. If you have a subluxation or vertebrae compressing the vagus nerve up here, or subluxations down here causing problems with the phrenic nerve, you could cause weakness in the muscles down here. That could cause problems. And a lot of people that have this, they'll be experiencing things like acid reflux. They might call it GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disorder or syndrome, however they want to call that. So people are feeling like heartburn, indigestion, reflux, acid indigestion, burping, belching. Those are all pretty big common things too. So there's a lot of things people could do that kind of help that, making sure one of the most important things is making sure that the acid in the stomach is high so it can digest your food. But there's little sensors on the top part of your stomach that will close a little sphincter at the top of your stomach. So when food comes down, that little sphincter in this esophagus here should actually close, so food stays down here and it doesn't go back up, and the acids don't go back up. But a lot of people have low stomach acid due to stress on the vagus nerve, which causes a more sympathetic response or fight or flight. So when you're trying to think about running away, you're not thinking about digesting your food. So there's less stomach acid produces. You eat the food. That stomach acid doesn't cause that sphincter to close, and that can go back up. So that's a discussion for another thing about low stomach acid and things you can do to improve that. One of the biggest things is making sure you have a lot of mineral salts. So, like using the real salt or the Celtic sea salt can have a lot of minerals like iodine and zinc and just a lot of general minerals. But the best one would be actually the high mineral vegetables, which would be like celery is your number one thing. So if you can get celery juice, that can help stomach acid and replenish all that. But this is more specifically talking about this. So what kind of things can you do to help this? So there's a few chiropractors. There's one really popular one in the States, but there's a very specific move. So we're not just trying to work on the muscles here. There's a physical move where I'm actually sticking my hands in right underneath this little process underneath the ribs, and I'm pushing it really quite firmly, and I'm going in there. I'm actually physically going like this to help pull down the stomach, to pull it away from that. Because as I mentioned, in that little hole, there's a normal resting tone that wants to be kind of tight. So if we just do enough work just to get the stomach to just clear that a little bit, it'll close over top of it. And if you do some other things to strengthen your diaphragm, then that might be able to stay down. So things to do to help your diaphragm, there's a specific exercise you can do. So a lot of people breathe with their chest. You don't want to be breathing like this. You want to have one hand up here and one hand on your belly. And what you want to be doing is kind of panting like a dog, but you want your belly to be going in and out, and not to be breathing up here. So when you go out, breathe in and out with your belly, it's your diaphragm that's coming up and down. So it'll kind of look like this. So you're going to breathe all the way out and then start breathing in pretty strongly. So it's like breathe out, and you're going to breathe in like this. So you're really forcefully doing that. You can do that a number of times, and that can really work that muscle. That can fatigue a lot of people because we're not used to using that muscle that much. And so then obviously I do that specific sort of pulling maneuver to really get the stomach mechanically out of the way. And it can be pretty uncomfortable, and you can get like emotional things happening because of the vagus nerve and everything else. But then what you can do at home, if you have you want to jump on your bed, or if you're lucky enough to have a Celerizer or a good rebounder, you can drink some liquid, maybe like a glass or two of water, to really kind of weigh down your stomach. So this is kind of it's kind of weighed down with water. And then you breathe out, jump up on the rebound, breathe in, jump out on the rebound. And when you're coming back down, just do a forceful exhalation. So the weight, this deceleration of you coming down on the rebounder is going to pull your stomach down. And then you breathe out forcefully, so that's going to make your diaphragm contract and cause it to kind of contract over top of the stomach that's being pulled down from that deceleration you get when you land on the rebounder. Foods to avoid if you've got this. Once again, these are things about the sphincter, but I'm just mechanically talking about that. But if your sphincter is weak from low acid, obviously you want to avoid things like refined sugars. Unfortunately, chocolate and coffee can cause that to be weak, and things like mint, peppermint, and those kind of teas and things like that, or taking mints, can sometimes weaken that little sphincter. Not the diaphragm, but just the sphincter at the top of the stomach, at the bottom of the esophagus. So those are some of the nutritional things. But so otherwise, what you want to do is obviously celery juice, or drinking celery, lots of fruits and vegetables, and those kind of things to kind of support the digestive system. So of course, if you want to be influencing the vagus nerve, one of the top-notch things to do is the network spinal analysis care, because it helps take our body out of that fight or flight and brings us into the rest and digest system, the parasympathetic, the relaxation, and it makes the vagus nerve work better. So all of these can work properly, proper stomach acid, proper digestion, everything else. And then also the phrenic nerve here. So you can also make sure that we check the zones, doing the zone technique to make sure all the different systems of the body, digestive, eliminative, glandular, circulatory, we make sure those, whichever one might be out of balance, we make sure those are balanced as well, so all of this can work as properly as possible. But the big thing is the specific move that we do here, get that out of the way, and then sort of support everything else with the chiropractic care that we do properly in the office. So that was a lot of stuff, right? So this is a specific move that I really do. It's really kind of forceful to get that out of the way, but it's a big problem that a lot of people have, and it causes a lot of mystery symptoms that people really don't even associate or wouldn't even know that they have this thing. And there's guesses like even like 7, 8 out of 10 people might even have this without even knowing it. A lot of people have it and don't have any problems, but if it's pretty pronounced, you'll know it. So that's something we do in the office. So if this was helpful, please share it. You might know somebody that has this. Please send them our way, and we'll try to help the best we can. So that's your health tip for this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.